and welcome to my February book reviews. I'm going to share with you short reviews and ratings for the 5 books that I read last month. Now, longtime viewers know that this is the lowest monthly total I've had since I started the channel. But February was very busy. I was in Japan for a week, I had another trip, I had a lot of performances, just didn't read as much. But rather than dwell on what I didn't read, let's talk about what I did read, because I did enjoy these 5 books. 3 of them were very, very good. Starting with To a God Unknown by John Steinbeck. Now, Steinbeck is a favorite author of mine, and I've been exploring his back catalog quite a bit in the last year and a half, something like that, having read all of the big famous ones. Well, To a God Unknown was my 10th read of Steinbeck's, and it's his 2nd novel. And even though this is an early novel of his, you can start to see already the greatness that he would become as an author. The prose is rich and assured, just like in his more mature works. Although I wouldn't say the characterization is as good as later works, he still just has that knack of that kind of everyman type character. And especially, he's great at portraying characters that are dealing with strife. And that happens in this book. Like a lot of Steinbeck, this is set in his Salinas Valley of California. We have a landowner who's flourishing until he isn't. A lot of this really gave me kind of some Grapes of Wrath vibes when you saw him start to struggle with just the elements that he was dealing with. But this character I really enjoyed, because one aspect of his character that was very unique is he had a very deep connection with the land and was very vocal about it. And it was almost druidic in nature. In fact, it gave me some magical realism vibes, which I wouldn't say that it's straight on magical realism, but it kind of had those kind of vibes. And I really enjoyed this one. So listen, I would not say if this is your first foray into Steinbeck that To a God Unknown is the place to start. But if you read all the biggies and you want just some more great stuff by Steinbeck, I recommend To a God Unknown. So To a God Unknown by John Steinbeck, I gave a 4 out of 5. Up next is Summer Night by Jim Butcher. Summer Night is the 4th book in the Dresden Files, and it's the first one that I listened to on audio. And I will say that all the hype around James Marsters as an audiobook narrator in these Dresden books is warranted. I thought he was fantastic. I thought in many ways he actually gave a little bit more to the character than I necessarily was getting on the page. Up until this book, this is the 4th book, as I mentioned, I honestly felt like Harry Dresden was one of those male chauvinists that thinks he's kind of a gentleman. Is kind of the vibes I was getting from him. I thought he was kind of smarmy in many ways. But I felt in this book that maybe it was Marsters just adding some more humanity to the character, or the delivery was better, or maybe Butcher's just subtly changing him and writing him a little different starting in this book. But I started to like Harry. I didn't really like Harry in the first 3 books. What kept bringing me back to the first 3 books was the world building. And I will say that world building in this 4th book was on point. It was one of the best aspects of this book. I had been waiting since the 1st book of the series to get further glimpses into the White Council of Wizards that Dresden is part of, and we finally got to see it in action, and it did not disappoint. Additionally, some other great portions of world building that I liked in this book was we got these rival fairy courts, the Winter Court and the Summer Court, some great world building, some great political dynamics between them as well. Love that so much. This book, though, I felt was a step below Grave Peril, the 3rd book in the series, and mainly because the story was just kind of ho-hum. It started off with a lot of promise, but it just didn't really go anyplace interesting. I will say it was not predictable like the first 2 books in the series. The 1st book was one of the most predictable kind of thrillers I've read in years, and the 2nd one was as well. This wasn't predictable, it was just not the greatest story. But overall, I still enjoyed it because of the narration, because of the world building. I still give this a very positive rating. And I give Summer Night by Jim Butcher a 3.5 out of 5. Up next is a short story collection that I finished in February with the unfortunate name of Kender, Gully Dwarves, and Gnomes, which is the 2nd book of the Dragonlance Tales series. And this is set in the Dragonlance world, and it's 10 short stories as an anthology by different authors. I read volume 1, I think it was last December, and really liked it. I thought it was very strong. Anthologies generally are going to be uneven. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. When you put a bunch of authors together, you're going to get some good stories. You're probably going to get some not so good stories. That collection I thought was a lot stronger than this one. This one was, to use the modern term, kind of mid. There were a lot of just ho-hum stories, but there were 3 standouts that I wrote down. There was a story by Nancy, Very, and Berberick that I really enjoyed that had the companions from the Dragonlance Chronicles series kind of in a prequel, and that was a fun story. That was actually the first story in the collection. And then there was a really fun one by Harold Baxt that dealt with the Gully Dwarf trying to take down a Dragon Lord, which was a lot of fun. And then kind of the best one was, of course, the novella by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, which dealt with Caramon's sons we met in a novella in the first volume of the Dragonlance Tales. So I enjoyed those 3 the most, but the rest of them were not quite as strong. But overall, it's a good collection, not as good as Volume 1. Hopefully, when I get to Volume 3 later this year, it'll be more like Volume 1 with a lot more quality amongst the authors in this anthology and the stories that they tell. But as for Kendra, Gully Dwarves and Gnomes, Dragonlance Tales Volume 2, I gave it a 3 out of 5. Up next, the chunker of the month was The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. This is the second book in the 5 Warrior Angels series, and it's heavy, so I'm just going to set it down. So I really enjoyed The Forgetting Moon Volume 1. I did a dedicated review for it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed that book. It was a great start to the series. It was nice to be reading true epic fantasy once again. And Blackest Heart, I think, upped the ante, and I think was a stronger book. I really liked a lot of the new characters. We got several new point of view characters that I think added more dynamic to what was going on in the story. Additionally, I continue to love the non-point of view characters because I have no idea what their motivations are. And I always enjoy that when authors are able to do that, kind of toe the line of wondering, okay, what is this person's motivations? Are they kind of a good person, bad person? What's going on with them? So I'm enjoying that aspect of it. Additionally, I liked how a lot of these stories, which are kind of far-flung in these different areas of the continents, start to converge, and you start to see some of the different plot lines converge in a meaningful way, and I really enjoyed that. But above all, the thing that Durfee does so well is he really misleads you very well. His sense of misdirection is a lot of fun to read, because just when you think you have a handle on something, he throws something in there that makes you question everything that you thought you knew. And then you're questioning if he's just deliberately misleading you again and what you thought you knew was right, or maybe a little bit of both. I'm really enjoying that because when I got to the end of this book, I honestly, I don't feel like I have a strong footing as to where this last book's going to go, and I can't wait to start it. I'm actually, as I'm filming this, I'm starting it tonight. So I'm really excited to read The Lonesome Crown. Now, I did a discussion on the channel already. It was a live stream with John from Talking Story and Usman from Bards and Books. So if you want to check that out, most of it is spoiler talk, but we do start with a very brief spoiler-free section where we talk about kind of the overview and the things that we liked most about this book, because all 3 of us did really enjoy this book. And next month, or in a few weeks, we will be doing a live stream talking about the whole series, and I'm really excited that it looks like Brian Lee Durfee is going to join us for that talk. So I'm very excited that John and Usman and I will get to talk with Brian and just peel away his head and find out what's going on with all this misdirection that he's been throwing at us in these 2 books. But I really enjoyed The Blackest Heart, the second book of the 5 Warrior Angels series by Brian Lee Durfee. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And my last book to talk about this month is my book of the month, and it is Stormbringer by Michael Moorcock. Now, I'm talking about not this omnibus edition, but the novel within this omnibus edition called Stormbringer, which was coincidentally the first novel written by Moorcock, but it's the last one kind of in the chronology. Now, there's another trilogy that is set kind of aside from this, but as far as the general Elric tale, this is kind of the end of the story. And it was the best one of the 8. It's the first one that I gave 5 stars, and I enjoyed it from beginning to end. The first strength that it had above so many of the other Elric novels is it was a novel. Most of these Elric novels were short stories and novellas that Moorcock put together and made it a novel. And sometimes those things came together well, a lot of times they didn't. Even when they did come together, it was still a bit of disjunct storytelling. This was one continuous story broken up into kind of 4 parts. Really loved it. So you had a very compelling narrative from beginning to end that wasn't compelling for a third, and then it became something else, which is kind of the flaws of some of the other books. Additionally, this really embraces Elric as the anti-hero. This is a character that feels so modern. It's hard to believe that this book was written, I think, in the late 60s, because Elric would be right at home in like Joe Abercrombie's First Law world. He's not good, he's not bad, he just is. And I really enjoyed that aspect. Additionally, I was really impressed with, especially knowing that this was written earlier, how fleshed out the characters felt, knowing that a lot of his character building he wrote after this novel. I think that's a really tough thing to do, and I thought he did it very well because I felt that they were fully realized in this book, even though he wrote this one so much earlier than so many of the other things. Now, as for some reading advice for Elric, I actually don't recommend reading all 8 of these, and I don't think you can start with this one. If you go back to the original Elric saga, which was 6 volumes, I think that's what you should read, to be honest. The 2 additional ones are The Fortress of the Pearl and Revenge of the Rose. Revenge of the Rose was easily my least favorite of the 8. Those 2, I don't feel that are necessary. You could read those 6 just to get to this book because it was so strong. The stakes are high. This is the end of Elric's tale, and I thought it was just so superbly done. I was so excited to finally get to that Elric novel that I just felt was superbly plotted, super compelling, and just a joy to read. So my book of the month was Stormbringer by Michael Moorcock, 5 stars. Well, that was my month. This video is a lot shorter than it normally is. I'm sure March will be back to like a 20-minute video as I read a lot more, but I did enjoy this month. It was a great month, both personally and my reading journey. I would love to hear your favorite book of the month, and I'd also love to hear if you've read some Elric, if you agree with kind of my assessment as far as what to read. I think reading those first original six novels are the way to go, not necessarily the 8 contained in these 2 omnibus editions. But if you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.